Good morning, friends, and welcome to Unity of San Luis Obispo. I'm Leona Evans, and we are here today on live stream. And so we want to thank you all for being here on live stream, whether it's live as we do it or another time during the week. It will always be in our archives, and a lot of these we also put on YouTube. So for those of you who don't have regular access to Facebook, one of them is already on YouTube, and we'll be putting more on in the coming weeks. I would like to ask you to like, reply, share what you like, share what you'd like to see more of, and just know that we are here at Unity of San Luis Obispo to bless, to shed light, to be the light, and be the peace that we want to see in our world today. So thank you all for being here. Now today, aside from the daylight savings time that we're experiencing, although I have heard that daylight savings time might be a thing of the past, depending on how that works out with the vote. I didn't get the specifics, but I think it might be nice to have one uniform time all year around and to have more sunlight. So we'll see how that goes. Our spiritual preparation for Easter is a time of setting goals, of reflecting on those goals, finding issues within those goals that we might need to work on, might need to overcome, and then finally overcoming those goals and moving on to our next phase in development. So it's a time, our Lenten season is a time when Christians throughout the world take an opportunity to reflect, to honor the time when Jesus went through the crucifixion and resurrection, and to recognize how that applies to each of us in our spiritual journey. Many of the traditional Christians will give up something for Lent, whether it's sex or chocolate or going to the movies. I remember when I was a child, children in school were asking, what did you give up for Lent? And of course, growing up Jewish, I had to ask what that was. By the time I was 8 years old, I understood that many Christians saw this as a time of personal sacrifice, understanding that if Jesus went through a crucifixion, then we certainly could go through the same kind of deprivation in our lives to understand exactly what he went through. Of course, in New Thought, in Unity, we see the crucifixion, resurrection, as a framework for overcoming. And rather than focusing on the crucifixion, we recognize that the crucifixion, or a time of interpersonal struggle, is a precursor, in fact is a roadmap in and of itself to the resurrection, which is an overcoming. So today I would like to share the idea of the crucifixion resurrection experience in the form that a wonderful philosopher, Hegel, H-E-G-E-L, gave us. It was a trifold methodology of evolution, of the way growth works, of recognizing the components inherent in what would be called a goal, a challenge, and its resolution. So the first word here in Hegel's dialectic would be thesis. In other words, this is what I want to experience. This is my goal. I'm setting my goal. I want to be an accomplished pianist, for example. This would be a goal. And this would be what we are setting for ourselves right now as we look forward to the resurrection. It's not just a hop, skip, and a jump, but it's a process. So here we have a thesis, a beginning statement, a goal. And in this case, it would be to be an accomplished pianist. So as the triangle moves toward the other side, we see that there's an antithesis. In other words, I want something, but I know I can't get it right away. Why? Because there's a barrier in between me and what I want. What is this barrier? Well, very simply, I don't know how to play the piano. And so right away, we're set up with a type of a crucifixion experience where many people would say, well, I want to be an accomplished pianist, but since I don't know how, I guess I can't accomplish my goal. End of the triangular process, the threefold process. However, when we take a look at the antithesis, really look at it, we see it not necessarily as a barrier, but as an opportunity to learn exactly what we need to learn in order to experience our greater good. So, we want to play the piano, we don't know how to play the piano. The choices are either we quit or we move on. Well, we decide to move on and we get a teacher and we set aside time every week to study the piano. We work at it. Sometimes it would seem very, very difficult because we don't like to practice and we don't enjoy the time it takes, and it's hard, and a lot of times we don't understand, and it requires a dexterity that we don't feel we have, but we move ahead. Why? Because we continue to have our eye on the goal. I want to play the piano. That was the goal. We work through the antithesis, depending on who we are, how often we study, how much energy we put into it. And we reach the synthesis, which is the compilation of what we want, what we've had to do to make that happen, and suddenly we're on the top of the triangle. We are an accomplished piano player. But you see, that isn't the end. The synthesis becomes the new thesis. Now that I'm an accomplished piano player, what do I want to do with that skill? Do I want to play in concerts? That might entail my leaving my comfort zone and moving into another area, perhaps another career. And so the synthesis, which is the new thesis, if you'll notice, if you take away the first three letters, you'll see thesis starting again. The synthesis becomes the new thesis, and that produces another antithesis. And we go up to the synthesis, and this is an example of how evolution takes place, about how mastery takes place. And so again, looking at the crucifixion resurrection experience, we see that what Jesus goes through, because we don't really talk about the thesis when we have crucifixion resurrection, but in fact the thesis for Jesus was to teach, to share his work, to be an example, to share his words, so that each of us could live a more abundant life. Each of us could have a relationship with the living Spirit of truth, which is what he called my Father, our Father. And so because that was his goal, he was willing, not happy about it, but willing to endure the challenges that came about in his life. And I think it's safe to say that the crucifixion experience exemplifies some of the worst of situations that could happen to anybody in life: physical, mental, emotional. Crucifixion that literally broke his bones, but not his spirit. And so the crucifixion then becomes the synthesis. He rises above the challenges. He moves forth. He's able to continue his work. However, the question then becomes the new thesis: I will have to carry on my work without a physical body. And so that becomes a whole new set of challenges that work themselves through and become an opportunity for all of us to work through and understand metaphorically how the process of growth works. So, when we talk about our antithesis, which quite frankly many people are afraid of, I don't want there to be any problems. I want what I want, and I just want to have it. I don't think I should have to suffer or struggle. Well, that might be true. Not every antithesis comes with sacrifice or struggle. Well, is that true? I don't know. It just depends on our attitude, doesn't it? If we're going to practice the piano and give up our free time and do all that it takes to get that goal manifested, then it wouldn't have to be a struggle if we trained ourselves to remember the goal and understand that this was a necessary step in receiving the goal, and also to understand with the antithesis, the more we discover our shortcomings, in other words, what we don't know about playing the piano, the more we understand how to practice more diligently, how to reinforce our goals, the original thesis, by taking the antithesis, taking the crucifixion experience, examining it, and finding a way out. So, does crucifixion always have to be a hideous and horrible experience that we fear? No. It does have to be a wake-up call, however. It has to be a wake-up call. And if we can remember what our initial goal was, our initial thesis, then we can hold that next to the struggles and understand that we're doing something not whose purpose is to cause us pain, but whose purpose is to identify what we need to do to get where we want to be. There's been some controversy lately among New Thought students about the question, is the solution in the problem? Why do people say the solution is in the problem? And how do we go about understanding that when we're not supposed to be dwelling on the problem? We're supposed to be dwelling on the solution. So how can the solution be in the problem? Well, very simply speaking, in our quest to be an excellent or an accomplished pianist, when we are experiencing the antithesis, we have a loving and expert teacher who shares with us what we can do to be more accomplished. In other words, there's a problem. This scale that I'm playing isn't working for me. I get caught in this particular mode. I can't seem to get out of it. I don't know how to really handle this. It's a frustration for me. I don't know what to do about it. Well, the solution is right in the problem. The teacher comes and says, look at your fingers, look at what's happening here. If you did it this way, if you approached it that way, no, but I have a habit of doing it this way. I've always done it this way. And the teacher says, I know. And that's actually what's producing the problem. The dexterity isn't there, the expertise isn't there. However, if you change this finger to that finger, you would ultimately be able to solve your problem and gain mastery. So of course, the solution is in the problem. What am I doing in my effort to gain mastery that's keeping me from doing that? For example, we always say in Unity that what we need to do is focus on the positive. And we want very much to do that. We want to focus on the positive, but that doesn't necessarily mean celebrating one's birthday every day of the year. That is not necessarily what we mean by positive. In this framework and in the crucifixion resurrection experience, The positive is doing whatever we can to achieve our goal. If we look at the problem, we can see a roadmap that has actually kept us from being where we need to be. So looking at the problem doesn't mean being overwhelmed by the problem. And so just looking at the negative, which would be the same as the difference between watching the truck or being under the truck. Being under the truck means we're overwhelmed by the problems. Watching the truck means we get an opportunity to examine from as objective a perspective as we can. We can examine where we are turning, where we are moving that might not be in keeping with our goal. So it's a tremendous opportunity for us to move forward and to not only accept and embrace, but become non-resistant to this process. It's going to be hard to do if we want to get a shortcut. For example, I was teaching at Unity Village many years ago, and I shared with them the triangular or trifold process of differentiation within the process of evolution and overcoming and moving forward, again, to just understand not only why, quote unquote, bad things happen to good people, but to understand how the overcoming process works. And these challenges aren't coming to us because we've been bad people. They're coming to us because of the goal that we have set for ourselves. So the student I had in class, after I got through explaining this, it took about 2 days because the class was rather lengthy. He raised his hand, yes, and he said, "Why can't we just go up the back way?" Why can't we just go up the back way? Because while it would be lovely to be able to think that all we would have to do is think right thoughts and we'd be able to live a life that's challenge-free, there's no evidence anywhere on this planet that suggests that we can or should think of a creative process as not having challenges. Let me tell you, from my earliest memories, I was a ballet student. Why was I a ballet student? I wasn't planning on being a ballerina. That wasn't my thought. My thought was actually I love jazz and I love tap, but everyone said you had to take ballet first as a foundation, which I understand. But what I didn't quite grasp at the time was that our family doctor sent me to ballet class because I was born with a club foot. I had the surgery, but habitually, even though I had the surgery in my first, I wore a body cast for the first year of my life. I had the surgery right after birth. Even though I had never walked as though I had a club foot, there was a certain muscle memory in there that caused me to turn in and walk that way. My wonderful grandfather, who was a shoemaker from Eastern Europe, I would have a brace on my leg and he would make my shoes in such a way that they would be strong and I would be able to walk straight, that there would be a mechanism in the brace that would move my leg out, but it really didn't work that well and I was really frustrated. Now, the goal that my parents had, the thesis was for me to get my legs strong. The antithesis was that I didn't seem to be able to turn out. I turned in. My parents, the doctor, were wise enough to see that there's more than one way to get something to happen. So they decided that they would buy me pretty ballet shoes and a pretty tutu. What little girl doesn't want that? And to go into ballet class so I would learn to turn out. Was it as easy for me as it was for the other students? No, not at all. They were constantly on my turn out, turn out. Later on, I had one teacher that used a cane. Maestro Petri, God bless him, may he live and be well. He was the best. He didn't beat me. I mean, you know, there's obvious drawbacks to beating a child on the knee with a cane, but he would come over and just a little bit, just a reminder, out, turn out, turn out. It worked very well. Did I ever feel that it was too hard and that it wasn't the kind of fun that it needed to be? Yes. Did it cause me to stop? No. Why? Because someone at my side, my parents, my teachers, were always telling me about how sacrificing some pleasure would create a type of discipline that would cause you to get what you want. And they always would say to me, is this what you want? If this is not what you want, then you don't have to do it. But if it is what you want, here's what you're going to have to do to get there. That was a blessing. That was a tremendous gift, that there was always somebody. There was never a point that I can remember from anybody in my environment who ever said, you should be able to go up the back way. No one ever pointed that out. No one said, well, Liana, you shouldn't be working this hard. If you want something, you should just get it. That never happened. My whole orientation was geared to work hard, work smart, do whatever you can to identify the problem, heal the problem, and move forward, which I do believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Matthew, is the way that I parent. Yeah. Is this what you want? How much do you want it? And if you want it enough, here's what you need to do. But you can't pretend you're doing it, or you can't just expect it to happen anyway. Would we like for it to happen anyway? Oh, I wish I could get over this and get to the point where it's easy for me. Of course we do. But Jesus is there with the ultimate example, not avoiding the challenge, going through the challenge, and having an understanding that the problem itself creates a solution. When you're crucified, using this as a metaphor, what are your choices? Either give up or rise above it. And so in unity, rather than identifying with the suffering during this spiritual preparation for Easter, which is what we tend to do anyway, why is this happening to me? What did I do wrong? How come I didn't do something better? How come I didn't think better thoughts? Why is this happening to me? Well, the trifold process of evolution, the dialectic, the crucifixion, resurrection, helps us understand how we can move through this antithesis, which can go anywhere from, I have to cook this particular dish for dinner, but I forgot to get the milk, so we're going to have to take some more time, go out to the store and get it and come back, to I've been told that I can't be healed, but I need to try to figure out and understand where there's a way through this, how there's a way through it. And history is filled with examples of how people have done that before. People have overcome the most challenging of circumstances and situations. And by overcome, I'm not always suggesting that it's a happily ever after. There are all kinds of ways to experience healings, all kinds of ways to experience peace of mind, all kinds of ways to get through our challenges by looking at what's keeping us from getting there, not dwelling on it or falling under it or creating a situation that seems so overwhelming that we can't move. Not by that, but by analyzing it. Again, not falling under the truck, but watching the truck. What is in this challenge that's creating an opportunity for me to find the way out? Because avoiding it is not the kind of examination and acceptance and embracing that we want to experience. But certainly, by looking at it as an opportunity to find the solution, we can understand, accept, and move forward without the continual resistance of, why should I be having to do this? Okay.